investigative reporting is being sort of squeezed out of the picture, and I think intentionally, because it tends to ruffle feathers. I mean, good investigative reporting does ruffle feathers, and it draws lawsuits, and it gets newspapers in trouble.
Imagine a world where the very institutions sworn to protect us are entangled in a web of deceit, drugs, and destruction. A world where covert operations fuel a domestic crisis, devastating communities, and altering the course of history. This is not fiction. This is the story of the Dark Alliance. In the mid-1990s, investigative journalist Gary Webb unearthed a scandal that would shake the foundations of American society. His groundbreaking series, Dark Alliance, published in the San Jose Mercury News, unveiled a sinister connection between the CIA-backed Nicaraguan Contras and the crack cocaine epidemic ravaging urban America. Webb's investigation revealed that for nearly a decade, a drug ring associated with the Contras had sold vast quantities of cocaine to Los Angeles street gangs, funneling millions in drug profits back to the Contra cause. This influx of cocaine played a significant role in sparking the crack epidemic that devastated communities across the nation.
On Your Side gives you some of the local inspiration to a film hitting the box office this Friday. It's a movie about a dogged investigative reporter who got his start at NKU and the Kentucky Post while living in Covington.
The series ignited a firestorm of controversy, leading to federal investigations and intense media scrutiny. While subsequent reports questioned some of Webb's conclusions, his work undeniably shed light on the murky intersections of international politics, covert operations, and the domestic drug crisis. Dark Alliance remains a pivotal moment in journalism, highlighting the profound impact of investigative reporting on public discourse and policy. In the 1980s, a new and devastating drug began to spread rapidly through urban neighborhoods across the United States: crack cocaine. This potent and highly addictive form of cocaine led to a surge in addiction rates and drug-related violence, particularly in inner-city areas. The sudden proliferation of crack cocaine left many questioning how this drug had infiltrated American streets so swiftly and pervasively. Investigations revealed that the roots of this crisis could be traced back to covert operations thousands of miles away, where geopolitical strategies intersected with illicit drug trafficking, ultimately contributing to the epidemic that ravaged communities across the nation. In the fervor of the Cold War, the United States was resolute in its mission to halt the spread of communism, especially in its own hemisphere. Nicaragua, under the Sandinista government with its socialist inclinations, emerged as a focal point of concern. To counteract this perceived threat, the CIA extended its support to a rebel faction known as the Contras. This support encompassed financial aid, training, and the provision of weaponry. However, with official funding avenues constrained, the Contras were compelled to explore alternative methods to finance their operations. The Contras, primarily composed of former members of the Usted Somoza regime, were initially a modest insurgent group. Through the CIA's recruitment and training efforts, their ranks swelled, transforming them into a formidable force against the Sandinista government. The CIA's involvement was not merely advisory, it was deeply operational. They orchestrated covert missions, including the destruction of infrastructure and the mining of Nicaraguan harbors, aiming to destabilize the Sandinista regime. These actions, while tactically significant, strained international relations and drew criticism from various quarters. As the conflict intensified, the financial demands of sustaining the Contra insurgency escalated. The U.S. Congress, wary of escalating involvement, imposed restrictions on funding through legislative measures like the Boland Amendment. This amendment specifically prohibited further financial assistance to the Contras, reflecting growing domestic opposition to U.S. intervention in Nicaragua. In response, the Contras, with alleged knowledge and possible complicity of certain U.S. officials, turned to illicit activities, notably drug trafficking, as a means to fund their operations. This clandestine nexus between the Contras and the drug trade would later become a focal point of controversy, raising questions about the extent of U.S. government awareness and involvement in these illicit activities. The intricate relationship between the CIA and the Contras underscores the complexities of foreign policy during the Cold War era. It highlights the lengths to which governments might go in pursuit of geopolitical objectives, sometimes blurring ethical and legal boundaries. the legacy of this alliance has left an indelible mark on U.S. history, prompting ongoing debates about accountability, oversight, and the unintended consequences of covert operations. Facing significant funding constraints due to U.S. legislative restrictions, certain factions within the Nicaraguan Contras turned to illicit activities to finance their rebellion against the Sandinista government. Notably, some Contra groups engaged in cocaine trafficking, establishing networks to smuggle the drug into the United States. Reports from the mid-1980s indicate that U.S. officials were aware of these activities. For instance, in 1985, a Contra leader informed U.S. authorities that his group was being paid $50,000 by Colombian traffickers for assistance with a 100-kilogram cocaine shipment, with the proceeds intended to support their insurgency efforts. Allegations have surfaced suggesting that elements within the CIA were aware of, and possibly complicit in, these drug trafficking operations. It is claimed that the agency turned a blind eye to the influx of cocaine into American cities, prioritizing the Contras' military objectives over the burgeoning drug crisis. This purported complicity has been a subject of extensive investigation and debate, with various reports examining the extent of the CIA's involvement in, or knowledge of, Contra-linked drug trafficking. These developments have led to significant controversy, raising questions about the ethical implications of covert operations and the unintended domestic consequences of foreign policy decisions. Central to the intricate web of drug trafficking that fueled the crack cocaine epidemic in the United States were three pivotal figures: Oscar Danilo Blandón, Norwin Menezes, and Freeway Ricky Ross. Oscar Danilo Blandón, originally a director of agricultural markets in Nicaragua during the Somoza regime, fled to the United States following the Sandinista revolution. In the U.S., he became deeply involved in the drug trade, using his connections to support the Nicaraguan Contras. Blandón's operations were significant, and his activities eventually caught the attention of U.S. law enforcement. In May 1992, he was arrested in San Diego on federal drug trafficking charges. While awaiting trial, Blandón began cooperating with the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, leading to a plea agreement that reduced his sentence in exchange for his assistance in other drug cases. Following his release, he continued to work as a confidential informant for the DEA. Norwin Menezes, another Nicaraguan expatriate, was an established drug smuggler with deep ties to the Contra movement. Known as a significant figure in the international drug trade, Menezes collaborated with Blandón to channel cocaine into the United States.
Y el bragar en busca de soluciones humanas con respecto al escándalo narcopolítico que me están promoviendo en sectores izquierdistas del Partido Demócrata Norteamericano con miras a las elecciones en Estados Unidos. No voy a emitir ningún comentario, pues soy totalmente inocente en lo que se me menciona, y que el mismo gobierno norteamericano ha afirmado que no se han presentado cargos formales en mi contra, por lo que resulta evidente que solo es una maniobra electoral para desprestigiar al Partido Republicano en la recta final de las elecciones en los Estados Unidos. Versículos del 25 al 37, si me permiten. Ya van bien, habían muchas diferencias. Vemos pues el egoísmo que reina en todos nuestros corazones. No permitieron siquiera pasar. Que tuve antes de la cámara con el caballero fue muy bueno. Hasta luego, que vaya bien.
Their partnership was instrumental in establishing a steady supply line that would have far-reaching consequences. Freeway Ricky Ross was a major drug dealer in Los Angeles. He began dealing cocaine in 1979 or 1980 and learned to make crack in 1981 from another acquaintance in Los Angeles. Ross met Blandón in 1983 and claims to have become the largest Los Angeles cocaine dealer before ever meeting Blandón. He purchased significant quantities of cocaine from Blandón until 1988 or 1989. The collaboration between Blandón, Menezes, and Ross created a pipeline that brought vast quantities of cocaine into Los Angeles. This influx played a significant role in the widespread availability of crack cocaine in urban communities, contributing to the devastating epidemic that followed. The profits from this trade were allegedly funneled to support the Contra rebels in Nicaragua, intertwining domestic drug issues with international political agendas. These key players, through their interconnected actions, exemplify the complex and often covert relationships that characterize the drug trade during this tumultuous period. Their story is a stark reminder of how geopolitical strategies can have unintended and far-reaching consequences on local communities. The sudden surge of affordable crack cocaine in the 1980s led to an epidemic that disproportionately devastated African American neighborhoods. Addiction rates soared, and drug-related crimes escalated, leading to a significant increase in violence within these communities. Between 1984 and 1989, the homicide rate for black males aged 14 to 17 more than doubled, and for those aged 18 to 24, it nearly doubled. Families were torn apart as many individuals succumbed to addiction or became entangled in the criminal justice system. The epidemic also led to a rise in child neglect and abuse, as well as family dissolution, placing a heavy burden on extended kin and community members who sought to support affected individuals. The legal response to the crisis further exacerbated the impact on African American communities. Disparities in sentencing, particularly the 100-to-1 disparity in sentencing for crack versus powder cocaine, resulted in a disproportionate number of black individuals receiving lengthy prison sentences for relatively minor offenses. The very fabric of these communities was irreparably damaged, with long-term consequences that continue to affect subsequent generations. The crack epidemic not only led to immediate social and economic challenges, but also contributed to enduring disparities in health, economic stability, and community cohesion within African American populations. In August 1996, investigative journalist Gary Webb published the Dark Alliance series in the San Jose Mercury News, unveiling a controversial narrative that linked the CIA-backed Nicaraguan Contras to the crack cocaine epidemic in the United States. Webb's investigation focused on a drug ring that allegedly sold large quantities of cocaine to Los Angeles street gangs, with profits funneled to support the Contras. The series highlighted the roles of individuals such as Freeway Ricky Ross, a major drug dealer in Los Angeles, and Nicaraguan smugglers Oscar Danilo Blandon and Norwin Meneses, who were purportedly connected to the Contras. Webb's reporting suggested that these operations contributed significantly to the proliferation of crack cocaine in urban America. The publication of Dark Alliance sparked immediate outrage, particularly within African American communities in Los Angeles, leading to public protests and demands for governmental accountability. The series also prompted federal investigations into the alleged connections between the CIA, the Contras, and drug trafficking. Despite facing significant criticism and challenges to his credibility, Webb's work ignited a national conversation about the intersection of foreign policy and domestic drug issues. Following the publication of Gary Webb's Dark Alliance series, major media outlets launched intense scrutiny and criticism of his work. Publications such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Los Angeles Times published articles challenging Webb's findings and questioning his journalistic integrity. Critics argued that Webb's claims were not well substantiated and that the series presented a mix of hard facts, supposition, and conjecture. For instance, the Washington Post described the series as a stew of hard fact, supposition, and wild guesswork. In response to the mounting criticism, the Mercury News conducted an internal review of the Dark Alliance series. Executive editor Jerome Chepos acknowledged shortcomings in the series, stating that it did not meet our standards in several areas, including presenting only one interpretation of conflicting evidence and using imprecise language that created misleading impressions. Chepos took personal responsibility for these flaws, writing, "Ultimately, the responsibility was and is mine." The external criticism and internal reassessment led to significant professional consequences for Webb. He was reassigned within the newspaper to a suburban bureau, a move he perceived as a demotion. Feeling marginalized and disillusioned, Webb resigned from the Mercury News in December 1997. Despite the initial acclaim for his investigative work, the backlash from both the media and his own publication resulted in Webb's ostracization from mainstream journalism. Webb's experience serves as a cautionary tale, about the challenges investigative journalists can face when confronting powerful institutions and prevailing narratives. His story underscores the precarious balance between pursuing hard-hitting journalism and navigating the potential professional risks involved. In response to the public outcry following Gary Webb's Dark Alliance series, the U.S. government initiated several investigations to examine the alleged connections between the CIA, the Nicaraguan Contras, and drug trafficking. The CIA's Office of Inspector General, OIG, conducted an internal review, resulting in a 2-volume report. The first volume, titled The California Story, was released in January 1998, and the second, The Contra Story, followed in October 1998. The OIG's investigation acknowledged that individuals associated with the Contras were involved in drug trafficking and that the CIA had relationships with some of these individuals. However, the report concluded that the CIA did not directly facilitate the drug trade, nor was it complicit in the crack cocaine epidemic. Specifically, the report found no evidence that any past or present CIA employees or individuals acting on behalf of the CIA had any direct or indirect dealings with key figures such as Freeway Ricky Ross, Oscar Danilo Blandon, or Norwin Meneses. Additionally, it stated that the drug trafficking activities of Blandon and Meneses were not motivated by a commitment to support the Contra cause or activities undertaken by the CIA. Despite these findings, the report did highlight instances where the CIA was aware of allegations of drug trafficking by individuals associated with the Contras, but failed to adequately investigate or act upon this information. This lack of action has been a point of contention and has led to ongoing debates about the extent of the CIA's knowledge and involvement in these activities. In addition to the CIA's internal review, the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General conducted its own investigation. Their report also acknowledged that individuals associated with the Contras were involved in drug trafficking and that there were instances where U.S. government entities were aware of these activities. However, similar to the CIA's findings, the Department of Justice concluded that there was no evidence of a systematic effort by the CIA or other government agencies to support or facilitate drug trafficking to fund the Contras. These official investigations, while denying direct complicity, underscored the complex and often murky relationships between U.S. intelligence agencies, foreign insurgent groups, and illicit activities. The reports highlighted the challenges in balancing covert operations with ethical oversight and the unintended domestic consequences that can arise from international political strategies. In the years following the publication of the Dark Alliance series, Gary Webb faced significant professional and personal challenges. After resigning from the San Jose Mercury News in December 1997, he worked as an investigator for the California State Legislature, focusing on issues such as racial profiling by the California Highway Patrol and a no-bid contract awarded to Oracle Corporation. He also engaged in freelance investigative reporting, contributing articles to various publications. In August 2004, Webb joined the Sacramento News and Review, an alternative weekly newspaper, where he continued his investigative work. Despite these efforts, he struggled to regain the prominence he once held in mainstream journalism. On December 10, 2004, Webb was found dead in his Carmichael, California, home with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. The Sacramento County Coroner's Office ruled his death a suicide, noting that while it is unusual for a suicide to involve 2 gunshots, it is not impossible. Webb's ex-wife, Susan Bell, stated that he had been despondent over his inability to secure a job at a daily newspaper and had recently sold his house due to financial difficulties. Webb's work, particularly the Dark Alliance series, left an indelible mark on journalism and public discourse. His investigation into the alleged connections between the CIA, the Contras, and the crack cocaine epidemic sparked widespread discussions about governmental accountability, media integrity, and the impact of covert operations on domestic populations. While his reporting was met with both acclaim and criticism, it undeniably brought attention to issues that had been previously overlooked or ignored. In the years since his death, Webb's contributions have been reevaluated, with some viewing him as a courageous journalist who dared to challenge powerful institutions. In 2014, the film Kill the Messenger was released, chronicling Webb's investigation and the subsequent fallout. further cementing his legacy in the annals of investigative journalism. Gary Webb's story serves as a poignant reminder of the potential costs of pursuing the truth and the complex interplay between the press, government agencies, and the public. The Dark Alliance series serves as a haunting reminder of the intricate and often nefarious connections between foreign policy and domestic crises. Gary Webb's investigation illuminated the potential consequences of covert operations on American communities, particularly those already marginalized. His work challenges us to question the narratives presented to us and underscores the importance of investigative journalism in uncovering uncomfortable truths. As we reflect on this dark chapter, we must remain vigilant, ensuring that such alliances never again wreak havoc on our communities. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the shadows of history. Remember to question, to seek the truth, and to hold power accountable. Until next time, stay vigilant.